The sound of a bulldozer engine roaring to life at 7 in the morning wasn't what anyone in Willowbrook Estates expected to hear on a peaceful Saturday, least of all the folks who prided themselves on silence, so thick you could hear a leaf drop on those cookie-cutter lawns. But there I was, standing in my kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips, watching my 72-year-old grandfather decked out in his favorite overalls and grinning wider than I'd seen since we lost Grandma Direct, that big yellow machine right across what used to be the HOA's precious green belt. Residents started trickling out of their houses, bathrobes flapping, some still clutching coffee mugs, eyes bugging out as Grandpa cheerfully hammered wooden stakes into the dirt, one for the tomatoes, one for the chicken coop, another for the future herb garden. The real kicker was the brand new sign at the entrance, private property. No trespassing, nailed up exactly where the Willowbrook Estates HOA's fancy welcome board had stood just the day before. Let me back up a second, because you probably think I'm making this up. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you. 8 months earlier, my grandfather sold his old farmhouse after Grandma passed. Said the house was too heavy with memories. He wanted peace, family, and a little patch of earth to keep his hands busy and his heart from breaking any more than it already had. So he bought the small ranch-style place just 3 doors down from mine, thinking he could garden a bit, maybe teach my kids a thing or two about beans and patience. But, well, Willowbrook Estates had its own ideas. Or to be precise, Karen Peaton, the queen bee of the HOA, had ideas, and none of them included my grandpa's version of peaceful retirement. It started with the little things. His hand-built fence was supposedly 2 inches too tall. The wildflowers he planted for Grandma's memory weren't on the approved list, and his beat-up '56 Chevy truck, which he's loved longer than I've been alive, got flagged as a commercial vehicle in violation of HOA bylaws. At first, Grandpa tried to play along. He trimmed the fence, even though it hurt to mess with the design he'd perfected over decades. He filled out paperwork for the wildflowers, even wrote a letter about why they mattered. He bought a cover for the truck. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She wanted control, the kind that makes folks miserable just because they're different. The fines kept coming. She said his bird feeders attracted pests, his flag was hung at the wrong angle, even the welcome sign on his door broke some rule about non-approved fonts. You can't make this stuff up. After 6 months of this nonsense, Karen dropped the hammer. She started eviction proceedings, said Grandpa had too many violations to be a homeowner in good standing. What she didn't know was that Grandpa, quiet as he was, had run one of the biggest farms in the county for 40 years. He knew land law inside out, and he knew how to wait. Instead of fighting or yelling, he started showing up at every HOA meeting, always in the back row, always with that old leather journal. He asked polite, simple questions about the budget reserve funds, and especially about that green belt the HOA paid so much to keep pristine. Karen would roll her eyes, explain how the space was just for visual enjoyment, not actual use, and the board would all nod along, acting like Grandpa was some clueless old-timer. But if you look close, you'd see his eyes sharp as a hawk, jotting down every condescending word. While Karen thought she was winning, Grandpa was digging literally and figuratively. He spent hours at the county records office, becoming fast friends with Gloria, the records clerk, by bringing her homegrown tomatoes and listening to stories about her grandkids. One day, Gloria mentioned something odd, a tax lien on the HOA's greenbelt. Turns out the association hadn't paid property taxes on the land in 3 years. The bills went to an old P.O. box Karen let expire after switching everything to email. By then, the back taxes and penalties added up to $68,000, and the county was about to auction the land off to settle the debt. Auction day came quiet and gray. Karen was busy prepping her case for Grandpa's eviction, totally clueless that a few blocks away my grandfather was sitting in the county courthouse clutching a bidder's paddle. Lot number 18, the greenbelt, came up, and only 2 others showed any interest. Grandpa just kept raising his paddle, determined as I've ever seen him, until the other bidders faded. $487,000 later, he owned the land the HOA had lorded over for years. Transfer was immediate, official, ironclad. The fallout hit on Monday. Karen opened a certified letter expecting to find another victory, and instead learned the land she'd used to keep everyone in line now belonged to the man she'd tried to force out. That night, the emergency HOA board meeting was so packed, my neighbor said it felt like a circus. Karen, turning shades of red nobody knew existed, barking at the lawyer to fix this while he calmly explained that the county sale was airtight. There was no recourse, no loophole, no going back. Grandpa owned the land, period. By the next week, Grandpa had the place surveyed and fenced. The HOA, for the first time in years, couldn't access the walking paths or manicured grass they'd lorded over. Karen tried to rally the board for new restrictions, but here's the kicker: now that Grandpa owned so much land, he had a major vote in the HOA, and plenty of neighbors fed up with Karen's nonsense were happy to support him. Suddenly, every motion she put forward died before it even got to a vote. Then came the real transformation. Grandpa didn't just let the land sit there. He plowed it, tilled it, and started planting. The concrete path became the foundation for greenhouse frames. He brought in lumber for garden boxes, fencing for chickens, even set up some beehives out in the corner. The first Saturday he opened the gate to neighbors, folks showed up with shovels and seedlings. Karen naturally arrived waving a cease and desist letter she'd found online, reading it out loud for drama. Grandpa just listened, pointed to his deed and the private property sign and said, "You're trespassing, Karen. Please leave or I'll have to call the sheriff." The crowd, some of whom had suffered Karen's petty rules for years, watched her turn purple, sputter threats about lawsuits, then storm off in defeat. That was the day the whole neighborhood flipped. Mrs. Chen, who used to keep to herself, started leading compost workshops. The Thompson twins became the official egg collectors. Even retired Judge Harrison, who'd served on the board before Karen's reign of terror, pitched in to build raised beds. Within a month, the old greenbelt was alive: tomatoes climbing trellises, squash vines snaking along paths, the scent of basil and thyme drifting on the breeze. Kids who'd never been allowed on the grass before now spent afternoons digging in the dirt, learning how carrots grow. Every Saturday, Grandpa hosted a little farmer's market, and suddenly the same neighbors who used to look away in the street were sharing coffee, swapping recipes, laughing together. But what really broke Karen wasn't losing control, it was watching the community become something she couldn't dictate. Property values started climbing, realtors started pitching Willowbrook's urban farm charm, and folks who'd never thought about running for the board decided to give it a shot. At the next HOA election, turnout was standing room only. On the agenda, a vote of no confidence in the board. Grandpa didn't have to campaign, his work spoke for itself. When the votes were tallied, Karen was out unanimously. For a moment, the neighborhood just stood there in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping, and everyone else joined in. That might have been the end, but life's rarely that neat. The state attorney general's office got a whiff of the shady tax situation, and when they dug into the HOA's books, the truth tumbled out. Karen had been siphoning money for years. Personal expenses disguised as community beautification. Salon visits billed as consulting. Even her daughter's wedding flowers coded as landscaping. They found over $200,000 misappropriated. The news spread like wildfire. Karen's real estate license was yanked. The HOA filed a civil suit to get the money back. Her husband filed for divorce the day after the charges were announced. The state pressed criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. I'll never forget the day of the sentencing. Rain pouring, courthouse crowded, Karen looking like a ghost as the judge read out 3 years in federal prison, $250,000 restitution, and 5 years probation. She lost everything trying to control everyone. As they led her away in handcuffs, she yelled about how she was only trying to keep standards high, how that old farmer ruined everything, but no one was listening, not anymore. Now every Saturday I walk down the path to my grandpa's urban farm, watching neighbors joke and kids chase chickens, the place buzzing with life. Sometimes I see folks standing by the old private property sign, smiling like they can't quite believe it. And sometimes I wonder, was any of this really about tomatoes and fences, or was it about showing people what real community looks like when one stubborn old man decides enough is enough? So let me throw this out to you. Was Grandpa right to play the game the way he did? Did Karen deserve everything that happened, or did the system just finally catch up with her? When does defending your home cross the line? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, argue your side, or just tell me if you'd have done anything different. After all, everyone's got a story about an HOA.